Welcome and thank you for being with us today. My name is Anna Marie Andrews and I lead marketing for Cielo. Really excited for our session and bringing Elaine Orler and Matt Jones together to talk TA Tech. We'll start by getting a few logistic items out of the way. First, we will be live tweeting this webinar and invite you to engage online using the hashtag #TalentMindset. We do want this to be a dynamic conversation, so if you have a question for Elaine or Matt, please use the tool to submit those at any point during the presentation, and we'll also save time for questions at the end. We'll also be using live polling during the session, so be sure to engage using the GoToWebinar tool. And finally, a reminder that we are recording the session today, and we'll send the recording along with the presentation deck to you via email tomorrow. We'll also be giving you early access to our latest TA Tech white paper authored by Elaine, but more about that at the end. A quick intro on Cielo, and then I will pass this over to Matt and Elaine. We are the world's leading RPO partner. We leverage our global reach, local talent acquisition expertise, and tech-enabled solutions to help clients achieve a sustained advantage through their talent practices. And one of our guiding philosophies is that we believe in technology that empowers people and people strategies. So I'm really excited for today's content about how the balance of the right technology with the right people and process can truly drive impactful outcomes. So with that, I will pass it over to you, Matt, to get us started.
Thank you, Anna Marie. So in order, I think good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Firstly, a thank you, a great excuse for me to go and find a suit and get dressed up. So thank you very much for that opportunity. Quick introduction, Matt Jones, I lead global operations for Cielo. I've been with Cielo 17 years. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working mainly in global operations with people, process, and technology. I have the great delight of working with a lot of very intelligent, smart technologists, from data engineers and integration developers through to RPA developers, through to client success and technology support teams. It's also my great pleasure to welcome a new colleague today, or a newer colleague today to this discussion. So after many years of collaboration, most of last year of partnership, we were delighted to welcome Talent Function as a Cielo company in December 2020, and I am delighted to welcome Elaine Orler to the conversation. Elaine.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's been fun so far. Super excited to be here, and with the background of 20+ years, and I did do the math earlier today, it's actually 25+ years in talent acquisition in the industry. I think I'm just going to continue to say 20 instead of 25. But looking forward to our conversation, but also the partnership that turned into the acquisition. Excited to be a part of Cielo as a whole, and the relationships that we have and the opportunity that we have to continue to build out technology consulting as we go forward. I think as we talk about what we're going to be covering today, our agenda is a couple of different things, and maybe we want to tag team on some of these, but new expectations for strategic talent acquisition. I can say that one 10 times fast, I promise. The current state of tech-enabled technology. You want to take the last two?
Yeah, we'll look into design principles that can help when thinking about a leading TA tech strategy. So hopefully some digestible, usable actions and advice, and then finishing up with building a case for change. So hopefully giving you some ingredients and then bringing it together at the end.
Let's see if we can do this and have a great conversation in the process, which you and I do on a regular basis, but hopefully we can now do this virtually with cameras and recordings. Let me start us off with some of our first topic. Really the new expectations for strategic talent acquisition. And as I thought through this topic and really where we are, it took me back on something that I did, a presentation I did at the end of 2019, which feels like decades ago now, which really isn't that far. And it was a closing keynote where I talked about what the trends would be for 2020. Lo and behold, many of those trends went to the wayside, like most of our business strategies and plans went to the wayside. But a couple of them carried forward, and a couple of them I think are going to carry forward into 2021. Most specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about vision. We're going to talk about execution. And we're going to talk about simplification overall. And when I think of these three, I think about the vision piece for an organization around how we're really strategizing for our roadmap. So I'm thinking most organizations, again, through the last year, through transition and change, have either been in a cost containment business model or in a revenue generating business model. What do I mean by both of these? Cost containment might be all of your talent acquisition business needs are, you need to cut cost, cut headcount, scale down based on the business drivers that are happening for the organization. Or in a revenue generating model, you need to look at what you can do to scale up quickly to be more advanced, more strategic in how you're delivering faster talent, better talent, faster to the organization. And if we look across the landscape of the last year, some organizations really had to scale down quickly, almost move to a cost containment model on a flip of a day. And those that were other organizations had to ramp up quickly in order to see that vision happen and align with that business objective of revenue generating or growth and expansion. The second area where I think there's been a lot of strategic decisions has been around the execution for the way in which we're delivering to our organizations. So thinking again really about the practices and the processes that we're doing. This is not just because of the 2020 hiccup or change or pandemic. We could use all the terms that exist for what happened in 2020, but this really resonates today in 2021 and what we're looking forward to doing. As organizations are starting to shift again, starting to align that business strategy with what equals cost containment or revenue generation, we're starting to see the need to move our practices and our processes into this kind of year and into what's coming next. And then the third one I see is simplification in a different way than most might think, not just on the way in which we would do it from a perspective of making processes better, but thinking about how we deliver talent to the overall business. Matt, we can talk about this one for sure, but the concept of total talent, recruiting for all badge types is a way in which I like to use the phrase. It's not just about the employee hire now. We've got to look at what's happening across all types of talent. It's also including what's happening from an internal candidate perspective, really elevating how those internal employees are being considered for opportunities as we go forward. And those are the three areas I see some of the major changes. Matt, what would you say?
I really like the simplification component. Of course, what we are seeing in the marketplace is more and more tech investment, more and more vendors coming to market, more features being offered, as well as what's happening in the talent marketplace. And so I think simplification is a really nice concept and something to think about and drive toward. I feel like there's quite a few different things impacting that simplification, and I think driving to that is it will be a challenge for some organizations, but not unattainable. And I think some of your original statements around vision and execution will help drive to that third pillar.
Definitely looking forward to, if nothing else, there's always going to be constant change, right? Maybe it's time to ask our audience what they think with one of our polling questions that's tied directly to this. And when we think about the polling question, it's the same kind of statements we were just talking about. We want to ask you to really consider which of these three statements best represent what's happening within your organization. Establishing a technology roadmap that aligns with your business vision, removing outdated practices or tech to redefine what good looks like, or assessing ways to simplify the hiring experience for all types of talent. So those are your three choices, and we're going to switch over to the poll, and we'll give it a minute or so for you to respond. Matt, while we're waiting for them to respond, this is a chance for us to debate which one do we think is going to be the most in the responses and the answers. What do you think?
Well, we didn't give everyone a chance to pick all three, so I like that piece first. So we're forcing your hands here.
We're definitely doing that.
I looked at the attendees. I think we have a really diverse group, so it'll be interesting to see if we get an even spread of priorities as a result. I think some of this is very organizationally driven. So depending on where you are in your journey and some of the things you described in the vision statement, Elaine, impact upon perhaps which of these is more important to you.
Great. All right, I think we'll just give it another couple seconds And we can close out the polling. And I think we have our results. Matt, would you like to, can you see the results?
Yeah, I think this is fascinating. So clear winner there in assessing ways to simplify the hiring experience. I'm sure we could spend a long time kind of unpacking what that really means. I'm guessing we're putting our different stakeholder groups forward here, so candidates or prospective candidates, but also our hiring managers, and I guess more importantly, or as importantly as well, our TA functions and HR functions as well. So interesting to see that one leading out ahead.
Well, like we talked about, I think it's an evolution, and it's definitely a direction for change for organizations. And it's glad to see that that one is one of the ones that's going to take a stand this coming year going forward. Let's shift gears a little bit. Matt, I'm going to pass it over to you. Let's talk about what tech looks like for our future, even with the kind of categories that we're talking about.
Thanks, Elaine. So I'm very fortunate to get the opportunity to talk to all of our clients globally, our prospective clients, the market, some of our technology vendors and providers. And you know, there's a lot of information, a lot of things coming back from all of those sources, but we wanted to distill those down into some themes and share what we feel like are important tenets of future-proofing technology for the future. You can see them in front of you, and I'm just going to talk a little bit through those at the moment. Automation, but I always like to use intelligent automation. We could also have unintelligent automation in on another slide and describe some opportunities there. I won't ask you for some examples, Elaine, of unintelligent automation, but I'm sure you've seen it in your travels.
Just a few times, yes, just a few.
Yeah, we've been able to automate the entire recruiting process, the TA process, for many, many years, and there's a reason that we don't. It's because we need to be cognizant of why we're automating, which sub-processes, which processes we are automating, and what experience actually that drives. So whether it's using simple in-platform rules, if this, then that, or whether it's using complex automation, using robotic process automation or other ways of doing things, very important that we put our design hats on and understand what we're actually moving toward. I work a lot in process design as well as technology, and I think automation is really should really be a result of understanding where opportunities lie in a process, rather than starting with the feature, which is automation, and working back to your process. Any comments or thoughts on that one, Elaine?
I think you articulated that one perfectly. I think the time that we spend in process design, whether it's process design or really journey mapping now, I think it's kind of the concept of an intelligent automation has the ability to really support those pieces as we go forward.
All right. Secondly, I want to talk about data. So data is increasingly becoming a really important currency in what we do from a TA perspective. It always has been, but we're reaching a point now where connecting our different data sources is reachable. And that's important because the data can tell you a lot about what's happening in your current process. It can tell you how difficult a certain requirement might be. It can tell you where you have inefficiencies. It can tell you how your candidates are feeling, how your managers are feeling. It can really give you insight into everything that's happening. And I think for the future, what we're thinking about here is really serving up data, meaningful data, big data at point of decision. So as we create requisitions or opportunities or needs, be they contingent workers or permanent staff members, or even considering partnering, how do we use data at that point to drive that decision, to tell us which strategy to use, and to move us forward? In the future, bringing all of that data together becomes easier. So the cloud-based platforms that we have nowadays, the data engineering capability that sits out there that's being made ever easier every year, allows us to start to combine all of those data sources together. So no longer are we recombining them at the end of a process in a very large Excel spreadsheet, but we're actually able to bring all that data together during process, from advertising, sourcing, experience, and other areas, in order to understand what that's telling us and allow us to action it.
I
think that
I would jump in on that one, Matt. I would just say too that connected data is not just reporting, right? We've so oftentimes just tried to get a standard or a basic report out of our systems, and in the historic way in which we've just, if I could just see a hire count, is a head count of number of hires for the last month or the last year. This is so much more evolved and so much deeper now than our ability to really predict the work that we need to do and predict the way in which we're going to get work done. It's exciting to me because those reports have passed, have been solved for. It's really time now to look at predictive.
Absolutely. The other thing I would add here is I think surfacing organizational data that we don't typically consider in a TA process as well. So I think one thing that last year taught most organizations was it's time to start understanding what you have already in your organization, within your organizational virtual walls, if you like. So if you're a retailer and a technology organization, and obviously retail is not happening, what are the skills that sit in that retail organization that can be redeployed into your technology organization or into another part of your organization? Access to that data, currency of that data is important in order to action those strategies. I want to talk a little bit about stakeholder experience. So there's no doubt experience has been up there in the last 5-10 years really as a critical factor. So we've seen the rise and fall of the careers site, and by the way, that's back on the rise again as far as we see in terms of investment and strategy. We've seen the move. I was actually discussing faxing timesheets at the beginning of my career earlier today with somebody. We've seen the rise of conversational AI to drive experience. We've seen the rise of kind of on-demand FAQ bots. We've seen the rise of all of these things that help drive experience. I think what we are going to see is more user-driven preference experiences. So actually choose your own adventure type approach. I know you like those things, Elaine, where individual candidates, not necessarily demographics of candidates, get to choose how they interact with an organization. So just because I'm an engineer doesn't mean I have to interact this way, or just because I'm an accountant doesn't mean I have to interact this way. I can choose my path through those interactions, and that could be heavily technology enabled, heavily conversational, the Amazon experience, or it could be highly personalized. But I think where in the past we've seen decisions around experience made at departmental, country, region, or talent segment levels, in future we're going to see a lot more user-driven preferences coming into those candidate experiences.
And you are right. I loved those books growing up, and I still do. I wish I could still find a collector's copy. But the exact example of letting the candidate and the customer actually define their direction and path, how much data they want to give you, how in which they want to interact, is definitely a direction we're going. And maybe I'll write a book on Choose Your Own Adventure.
I'll definitely buy that book, Elaine. So connected to that is actually transparency and access. So I'm going to carry on using the Amazon example because I, like probably many of you, end up buying something most days on Amazon because it's easy. But the other thing it gives me is real transparency and access to what's happening with my order. And I think if we apply that to the TA space, that's what we're talking about. So combining really connected data, stakeholder experience together, we can start to give our users, our stakeholders, greater transparency. So that's candidates. Where am I in a process? Who can I speak to? How do I find out? What should I wear for my interview? Those kind of questions that come up, and being able to answer those immediately and in a transparent way. But also for our hiring leaders and stakeholders, what's happening with my requisition? What does the barometer tell me? Am I in good shape? Am I in bad shape? Is my order ready to collect? Is my order on its way? So I think actually driving to that transparency and access through using different tools for stakeholder experience and using data is the fourth trend that we're starting to see organizations think about for future-proofing technology.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a huge opportunity with this as well. And as candidate experience continues to be, it's not a buzzword, it's an action that organizations have to take. It's a focus that we need to have. And transparency is definitely the term that is everybody has got on the forefront of their mind. And how do we present that information in a way that somebody can actually take action on it and be successful with the activities that they're trying to do? And I always go for a candidate to know where they are in the process is a huge step, and it's more organizations need to take that as a baseline standard that they need to have as they move forward.
I wanted to jump in with a question that we actually received from an audience member, because it does connect back to a theme, Elaine, that we actually address in our new white paper, but is also a concept that organizations are thinking about when we look at future-proof strategies. So here's the question for you, Elaine. How do you build equity from a diversity perspective into your recruiting process? And I think I'll add, when you're looking at technology and adding that into your process, what should you be considering from a DE&I standpoint?
Oh, that is such a great question. That's probably, Anna Marie, a whole nother webinar for us to consider. Just on that topic alone, there's the compliance aspect of the topic. There's the really putting your business forward on what the right activities and decisions are. And Matt, I'm sure you've got some ideas on this as well, but I would start with, I think it's really important that we think about the overall strategy for organization for DE&I and how we embed that strategy into the technology and into our business processes. There are some ways in which organizations, you can lean too far in one direction or another, but the balance is the most important part. How are we identifying the right type of talent to bring into our organization? How are we bringing the diverse talent forward? Mitigating unconscious bias, or going to a concept I'd rather say is driving towards conscious inclusion. How do we continue to make those decisions forefront? But I know that there's technology implications as well. Matt, did you want to cover a couple of those?
Well, I just wanted to give some really practical suggestions as well. So we talked to a lot of organizations, and typically the strategy points in one direction. So my hiring community doesn't know how to give diverse and inclusive interviews, or my sourcing strategy doesn't reach the right candidate pool and it's not actioning, it's not being delivered in an inclusive way. My job descriptions and my job advertising is alienating certain groups. And they're all real examples and real problems that we see. I think the risk is addressing an individual one of those items on their own doesn't really consider what the TA process is, which is we need to go speak to the market, find some candidates, we need to engage some candidates, we need to bring them through some kind of process, and then we need to make a hire. So if we're just addressing how our managers are interviewing, yet we don't have any diversity in the candidate funnel, so the people we're bringing through to that interview, really doesn't matter how diverse the interviewer or interview questions might be. If everyone looks and sounds a lot like Matt Jones, you're probably going to hire Matt Jones at the end of the process. Don't do that. So I think what's really important is, if we're focusing on what technologies, what strategies to use, is just make sure we're sort of also equitable in how we think about our process, and make sure we're not solving downstream for something that also needs an upstream solve at the same time. So I guess my advice would be, if you have a finite budget, try and chop that up a little bit into 2 or 3 or 4 sections, so that you can address all of those parts of your TA process and get there. The final thing I would say is that really, these 4 example tenants here, there should really be a lot of other kind of horizontal lines underneath that say things like diversity and inclusion, AI in the recruiting process. As you think about it, these were really just themes as we go forward.
That's such a great example. Just looking at the recruitment process from beginning to end, and I love the way you projected it. If you have a narrow funnel at the beginning, the outcome is going to be the same narrow funnel. And I use the flip of that example as well. You can open up your funnel to have a broad, diverse set of candidates, but if your interview process is such that it's not actually enabling that diverse candidate population to move forward, you've got a different point in the process that you need to evaluate. And it does take the full end-to-end scope to make sure that you're incorporating your DE&I strategy in the best way possible. So hopefully we've answered that question, Anna Marie. We'll keep them coming.
Yeah, that was wonderful. And actually, it's you'll see it comes up on this next slide, so we may have already covered off on one of our trends.
I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like, well, we could start from the bottom and work our way up on these trends, and we've covered one already. I think as we talk about what's really tech enabled today and where we are, we've got a long way to go, and we've always had a long way to go. One of the things that I've appreciated in my whole career is I've got to experience the evolution of talent acquisition technology, back from when we used to call ourselves personnel, to staffing, to recruiting, to now talent acquisition, but just how technology has evolved from the transactions that it used to be only, to the capabilities that we're now actually bringing forward, and the understanding of our audiences as a whole. But one of the things we're starting to see again in the trends, and these are cyclical trends that I've watched over the last 25 years, is we're starting to see consolidation with the larger organizations again acquiring point solutions. So there's been a plethora of announcements and press releases in the last 6 months where we're starting to see some of the point solutions being acquired by maybe a larger platform play or a larger cloud play product. And these point solutions are embedded into their platform then and expanded upon from those perspectives. As we see that happen, we're also starting to see an expansion across point solutions, fewer point solutions for the recruitment steps. So a single partner invitation across the recruitment process. So that ability to see that integrated approach from one side to another. But on the third point, and then Matt, I'll definitely ask you to comment on some of these as well. We've seen some products that have come out to market today that are really taking us back to the transaction-based activities and standardization across the way we do recruiting. So we're seeing some limitations. I've got organizations that we work with on a regular basis that are dealing with decisions that were made about how talent acquisition needed to be delivered that were outside of the talent acquisition team's preview or preferences on way in which they need to work. And so from one trend, we're seeing an advancement in the way we do work, and we're also seeing another trend in the, I would say, the non-enablement, so the holding back of the way in which we can do work back to a transaction model. And before we get into the new ideas, Matt, do you have any comments on these as well?
I was just thinking on the first one, I can think of probably 4 conversational AI acquisitions that have happened in the last 6 months or so. So, you know, conversational AI, very popular at the moment. I think, Elaine, you and I were saying it's only recently been called conversational AI, right? So, right. So we know a lot of that's happened. I've also seen a fair few Series A's granted in the last 3 to 6 months, which, if you think about some of the economic outlook, is possibly surprising, but not for those of us around HR technology. So still a lot of investment, a lot of M&A activity happening in the provider space, for sure.
And I think it's one of those things that will be inherent for the past as we look back, how it's happened, and in the future as we look forward. There is always going to be these great new innovation tools that come up, and all of a sudden they become part of a holistic platform. And then a new set of innovation tools come up, and we decide if it's going to be a platform or a point solution model. But I think the one that I would just carry on is the less new ideas for more second and third generation products. So it's harder to define the difference in the hiring experience as we go forward. But it's saying it's harder, but it's not impossible. So really, they're just making sure that as organizations, we're thinking about the tools and the products that we need to be successful. And I know we're going to cover this as we move forward, but the opportunity to really think about the way in which we want to deliver the technology to our organization is actually critical to your overall success. So maybe, Matt, we'll just dive right into that as the next topic. And let's talk about where, I heard Anna Marie. Nope. All right, Matt, it's back to you.
Thanks, Elaine. So just wanted to think about, again, what do we see as technology models for TA moving forward? And we're going to characterize these as kind of individual models. Of course, there's going to be some gray areas in between as well, and we can sort of debate that. Interesting, Elaine, you said that we're seeing more large scale standardized tools creeping back into popularity. And that's where I would sort of characterize our first model, which is core or foundation. So thinking about perhaps an enterprise related tool, so maybe connected to an ERP strategy, an Oracle or an SAP house or something else like that, or actually maybe just a specific vendor. But this model is characterized by really working with a vendor across, or a partner across, the 2 or 3 key kind of areas for talent acquisition. So it could be described as ATS plus CRM plus OBS onboarding systems together. You could throw in VMS into that discussion as well. So that model really is about working primarily with a single partner to provide those capabilities and being tied to that partner's roadmap and capability. There's definitely some things to watch out for there, which we'll come on to in a moment. I guess some of the things that organizations looking at that strategy enjoy is you're very clear what your roadmap is. Actually, the management of that partner and that strategy is relatively low, less intensive, because you have a single provider who provides all of those capabilities. Certainly from a kind of workflow compliance and data perspective, you're managing all of that in a single location, and gives you a slightly easier lift when it comes to where your data is and how you're managing all of that compliance. Anything you'd add to that sort of core foundation benefit, Elaine, before we talk about some of the areas to watch out for there?
I go back to the history part on this one. It's such a great concept now that it is a core and foundation, because it used to be that the only thing we saw at the core solution was the ATS. And I've long since wanted to abolish that the applicant tracking system is the only thing you need in talent acquisition. And it's becoming true now, the core foundation being much more than just applicant tracking today. Again, with, like you said, the onboarding piece and then the CRM piece being critical to at least getting that foundation is still the evolution from what we used to call just the ATS.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess some of the limitations or things to watch out for if you're choosing this strategy. So certainly some benefits. One of the things to consider is you're probably not going to get everything you need for your TA process from one provider. So that could be sourcing channels, that could be market intelligence, it could be another specific point in your recruitment value chain where you need to augment with an additional point solution. So making sure that your preferred kind of foundational core partner plays well with the additional tools that you want to bring in is kind of important. The other thing to consider there is you are going to have to maybe embark on a few integrations and activities to get all of that work consolidated into one place. I guess the final point to consider is, what if your needs don't necessarily match the needs of all the other clients that are being provided that service by a single partner? Well, then you're going to find it a little bit more difficult to get some of your items on the roadmap for development. You're going to find it a little bit more difficult perhaps to meet some of the changing needs of your organization. So probably slightly lower on the agility scale in terms of choice in that space. Anything you want to add to that, Elaine, around watch out?
I think that's a great call out. It's definitely more of, because it's even just in the concept and the term, the foundational piece, that the agility is not as great as you might find in the other conversations we're going to have on the other two. But I think that core piece goes back to another way to solve for what I call the transaction side of the business. There is some innovation that's happening there, but predominantly we're covering the basics that need to happen from a recruiting perspective.
That's great. So let's sort of jump to the other end of the scale and talk about lots of point solutions. I feel like 2020 was probably the year of the point solution. Before I start, Elaine, anything you want to talk about around last year and what we saw happening with point solutions and just in general?
Oh yeah, it was. I think I love the way you said that. It was the year of point solutions. There was standing up a new product here and there, and just the amount of solutions. I worked with clients for, again, going on 11 years as talent function. And one of the conversations we constantly have with our clients are name out all of the products that you're currently using in recruiting. And I think the most I ever heard from one client was 31 different products. And then the next question was, how well are they integrated? The answer to that was a roll of the eyes. And the number of times in which a practitioner or a user had to create a login or account or authenticate into another product, into another solution to perform similar tasks was daunting. So I think there are some huge values to the point solution market and what those products will bring to the innovation scale. But the challenge becomes really how many can you adopt and how fast can you integrate them to your overall organization. But I think you're going to cover more on this.
Well, I think you said a lot of it there, but I mean, this is really super agile, so a way of responding to changing needs. I think one of the reasons I said last year was the year of the point solution is that some stuff happened last year that like moved all of our cheese, and we had to think about how we did things differently. So certainly video and virtual became very, very important, and so we saw new entrants to the market. We saw rocketing usage of those kind of point solutions. But I guess characterizing this is where an organization has differing needs and is solving for each of those use cases or those needs with a different partner or vendor. You probably won't be procurement's favorite person for using that strategy, but it is highly agile. And for the right organization, it can provide some really interesting outcomes. I guess some of the watch outs, as Elaine said, how do you reconcile all of those solutions? How do you bring your data back together? So if you want a consolidated view of the world, you want to understand what's happening in a certain region or a certain country juxtaposed to what's happening in a different region or a different country, a different talent segment. If you have different tools deployed, it's a more labor-intensive task to unify all of that. And actually going through the process of trying to integrate each one of these things together with each other can be a pretty labor-intensive activity. Not impossible, before someone on the audience tells me they did it successfully, but is often a sort of labor-intensive activity. Certainly more agility, the ability to pivot quicker. At some point, you probably end up with maybe a few too many, and there's a rationalization exercise that kind of has to happen.
And 31 is too many. Let me just, I can put that number out there as a, let's make sure you don't have 31 different point solutions trying to solve for the talent acquisition equation. And I think you brought up something else I think is really important, the innovation scale for point solutions. This is where the new ideas are really incubated and brought forward. So where your organization has an appetite and ability to experiment with something new in a different way, to be disruptive in what you're doing, the point solutions as a point or a standalone solution could be a way in which you could experiment in a safe place to determine what really might be the objectives for your overall change.
Absolutely. So I think it brings us on to our third, and I don't want to characterize this as the best of both or a combination of both. There are some components that might be a bit of both, but it is a slightly different strategy. So when we talk about cloud or platform, what we're really talking about is picking a provider that can sort of power the core, bring our data and our experiences back to a single location, probably with a completely open architecture that allows you then to plug in the different point solutions you need to run an effective TA process. You can unify all the experience, you can unify the data, you can bring things back to a single kind of workflow, which allows you to see it all happening and gives your teams a better opportunity to not have to log into 31 things, Elaine. But actually you're still working in a kind of workflow that's about getting the work done. You can overlay other technology as well. So intelligent automation, this is where we can start to overlay that kind of technology and kind of AI as well. So sounds great. We can build this kind of cloud of connected different point solutions that provide us all the innovation that we get from a point solution universe with some of the foundational workflow kind of compliance and data integrity we get from the foundation model. What I would say is that this can be a bit of a reach for some organizations because this does require some engineering and development work. This requires the ability to probably have a dedicated team to your HR, IT, or TA, IT efforts in order to curate the platform on an ongoing basis, because What's important is that we don't stand still, and that as we see new solutions coming to market, like new apps on your cell phone, and I was looking for my cell phone and I can't find it, I was going to show you the example, but as new apps come out, as new apps come to market, and you want to be able to leverage them in your TA process, you're going to need team members who are out there looking for those things and understanding that it's coming, or a partner who's out there looking at those things and understanding it's coming, and then a team that's able to say, out of these 5 new tools, this is the right one to integrate into our cloud or into our platform. So certainly it sounds like we can achieve some agility and some sort of solid foundation and workflow with this model, but it does require investment around how you get there and how you kind of curate. So Elaine, I'm curious, you talked to a lot of organizations, like how many people are driving toward that strategy right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's an interesting component of going back to one of the things we said originally. What type of business model or vision is driving your strategy? Is it cost containment, so lowering the overall footprint of the cost associated with bringing talent into the business, or is it revenue generation? Is it about leading into the organization's growth and development? And I see more organizations that are in a growth mindset, quickly moving more towards the cloud and the platform, because it's giving them the opportunity to really connect those pieces that are necessary to be differentiating as they move forward. At the same time, I think those organizations that are in a cost containment tend to be closing down some of those products to move back to more of that core foundation model. Could be because of cost, it could be because of the, like you said, the additional resources that are really necessary to make that cloud vision come to fruition. Those that are moving into what does this take from a growth perspective are definitely moving towards this platform and cloud model. One of the things I would bring forward about this as well is because the clouds tend to, and this is me being metaphorical a little bit, but clouds have a shape-shifting model. They're not a single size. One size doesn't fit all. So you have the ability in this kind of model to really differentiate what kinds of solutions you're connecting. It may change over time as your organization evolves. You may see example of user experiences being driven through the cloud versus through the core foundation product. The ability to layer in types of experiences that you might not have been able to do before because of the integration challenge or because it wasn't existent within the core product. So I'm excited for the way in which the cloud products are going to evolve the way in which we do business as talent acquisition.
Fun fact, or maybe not fun fact, I have a privacy background, so I'm a certified international privacy practitioner. But the reason I mention that is possibly contrary to belief, the cloud or platform approach actually helps service some of our IT colleagues' needs and wants around better privacy and better security, because connecting through in a secure way gives us less chance of any data leakage, of any candidates being left behind, of any information being retained beyond a period that we should. So actually bringing into this model satisfies some of our security and privacy colleagues around the world as well as we look at that. Okay, I think it's time for another, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say another poll, right?
I think it's time for another poll.
Let's go through this one. So really what we're going to do is understand what's driving your talent acquisition tech investment and decisions going forward. Are you adding automation into the process end to end? Are you moving away from disparate solutions to one provider? Are you reducing bias in the hiring process, improving process efficiencies, and improving the candidate experience? Those are your choices. And we're going to let the poll take over and give you a chance to respond. I think we were hoping for maybe an F category of all of the above, right, Matt? I think having an organization have to really differentiate between which one of these is going to be really interesting on the results.
There is an option to select all that apply, Elaine, so we'll see how common that is.
Okay, it's on the poll.
I think based on some of the questions and based on last year, I think we might see bias in the hiring process scoring quite highly here, as in reducing it.
Yep, it's definitely one of the areas where we see a lot of questions coming from our prospects and clients as well. Is how can we solve for this quickly? I tie to that though, improve process efficiencies. I think that's just a standard. We're constantly trying to make things better across the way in which we do work. So they're all good. I would pick all.
Move away from the fax machine I was describing earlier.
Wait, what's a fax machine? Okay, I'm just kidding. And I can't see the results, but when we do publish them, we'll give it another, I think they're coming through now. Matt, why don't you talk through a little bit of the results?
Well, I think you predicted entirely accurately, Elaine, that removing the process or improving the process, not removing the process, but getting at those tech inefficiencies was going to be really important. I'm really pleased actually to see candidate experience right up there as well. And then I guess, you know, not necessarily surprised by automation being where it is. So very, very interesting. I think possibly asking a different group, we might get different answers. I think it's another example of where different organizations are at a different stage in their maturation around TA technology.
Yeah, I would also probably comment to process efficiencies could category, all the rest of these could fall within that same category. Improving candidate experience also means reducing bias. It means adding automation to the process. So we might have loaded up for what would be the more consolidated answer. As we did this polling question, we probably narrow our choices the next time around. But I'm glad to see it as process efficiency though, because I think there's huge opportunities. It's one of those areas where it's something you can focus on in a small area and take it in bite-sized chunks. It's something you can look at holistically as you're dealing with your talent acquisition delivery models, and the resources that you have, the ways in which you're getting work done are all critical from that perspective. So it's not something that waits on a massive budget to make change either. It's something you can make in incremental pieces depending on what your organizational strategy is.
I'm interested to see moving away from disparate solutions to one provider being reasonably low, because you and I, Elaine, see the growth of some of the large enterprise HCMs. We see how many new organizations are taking up that strategy. So I guess surprised and encouraged to see that that there's some alternate opinions in the group.
Yeah. Well, perhaps it's because this group has already done it. Perhaps they're already on that evolution path, because we probably have some really sharp people on our listening today. And I think maybe that's the case, where we both know from prospects and clients that this is still one of the big areas that they need to accomplish. So maybe we'll just talk a little bit about that business case for change, and then what are some of the key things that organizations have to do? And I know you have several points to add to this, but I think one of the ones I'll start with is the first one that's on the list. And I think we really need to get everybody to uncover what the challenges are. So oftentimes I saw organizations start from what I call a running from stance versus a running to stance. And the reality is we're always running, but the running from is I'll take anything better than what I have. When those statements start like that, when we start with our priorities or our situations as a statement which is better than what we've got, it's hard to actually envision what you could actually be achieving. So I use the analogy, some organizations, I'll take any applicant tracking system better than the one I have, or anything's better than what we're doing now. And those statements are constantly looking back. So we say, stop looking in the rearview mirror and start looking forward. As we're going forward and start to turn those questions around, what are our pain points, but how can those be opportunities for us? What is it we really are trying to accomplish as we move forward in the organization? So what things would we like to see innovative or different? And as you start to focus on those forward-looking statements, your vision and your outcome for what you're trying to build in the business case for change is now about the direction you want to go, not about the direction you're trying to avoid. So I think that's one of the first things I would give the audience as a takeaway, is to make sure that you're talking about where it is that you want to go in your business case for change and why you want to get there versus where you are and why you want to leave it. The second thing, and I say this on a regular basis, you have to inventory what you have. We talked about the client having 31 different point solutions in their ecosystem. Knowing what your products are, and products could be anything. So don't forget your background check provider as a product or an application form. Don't forget that your onboarding system might be multiple products put together. So you really have to take time to really inventory all of those solutions across the board. Understanding again that inventory is a massive list. I typically take that inventory list and add in, when did we buy it? Why did we buy it? What is our level of appreciation for it or usability for that type of solution? Because you gain a lot more knowledge when you start to think about how many different products you have and the way in which they're connected, but also the evolution of the relationship with those products. Is it in a growth mode? Is it in a stagnant mode? But some of those pieces that really differentiate those relationships as you go forward. So Matt, any comments on those first two?
No, I think the art of the possible, as in where would you like to be, or the what if we could kind of statements are often a really nice exercise. So what if we had 0 time to fill critical vacancies? What if we had all our candidates giving us rave reviews, so they were recommending? What if all of our hiring, starting with some of those what if statements is a really interesting exercise. Kind of frees you, like you said, from thinking too much about the limitations of what you have today.
Right, exactly. Which also ties directly into our third point too, which is the investment and the timing. So really, again, making sure that those business outcomes are what we're willing to commit to. It is one thing to have a lot of great vision for the ideal candidate experience where it's one click apply and all the magic happens. Well, the reality is there's a lot of work that has to go in behind that. So knowing what you're willing to commit to from that vision perspective so that you can write it into that business case for what your expected outcomes are. And tying into that as the last one, I think is the most important, is the fact that you really need to have all your appropriate internal stakeholders. The number of times that I've seen business cases fail because they neglected a specific audience internally that really has a voice within the process. So this might be the alignment with IT, the alignment with HRIS, the alignment with finance in some cases, but making sure that those that are really stakeholders in the process have an ability to interject what they also feel can be tied to that vision. But don't let them, at the same time, the relationship needs to be solid for the business case. But you, at the end of the day, I constantly want to ask all talent acquisition professionals to remember this. You're the one that knows talent acquisition the best. You're the one that knows what your operating business needs to be. Talent acquisition operates at the speed of the market. The rest of HR operates at the current speed of the business. And if we're not out there in the forefront looking for what needs to be different in order to take our business there, our tools need to be doing the same things. And that's part of the business case you have to write, is making sure that the technology and the business process and strategy that you're trying to deliver is going to deliver to the market standards, not necessarily to where your business is today. And last but not least, because I would be a terrible consultant if I didn't say this off the bat, but sometimes it does help to have partners that can help you through this process and journey. And there's an opportunity to look for, there's a dozen plus great organizations that help organizations through this process to build the business case, to understand the market, to understand how in which you might be able to leverage technology as you go forward. So I can think of one particular that I like. Maybe Matt, you know one too.
I know one too. I would just add to that as well. I know Anna Marie's here either to wrap us up or ask us a question, but I would just add to that final point, find some role models as well. So talk to other organizations who've been through the journey, or successfully or unsuccessfully, right? We learn just as well from the mistakes as we do from the successes. And I think most organizations who've been through are happy to either share success or give you some pointers on mistakes. Anna Marie, I should stop talking now for you.
No, I love that recommendation, Matt, to reach out to your community and your own peers to look for guidance and advice. We did have a question come in about building the case for change. The audience member shared, I've tried to build the business case for investing in new technology, but had trouble getting my stakeholders on board and aligned. Do you have any specific advice going forward?
Matt, you want me to take that one first? You wouldn't take it first?
Yeah, I've got a few ideas. You jump in and then I'll
Great. I think one of the biggest things in that kind of model is making sure that you're aligning that business model to really where the business is at. So the number of times where I've seen organizations build out a business case for revenue generation, how we can exceed our expectations, how we can grow in a growth development when the overall organization is still in a mindset of how can we cut cost. So making sure that that business case is aligning to those organizational models without giving up the fact that we know that we need to be operating at the speed of the market. So there are ways to write a business case which shows cost containment or the ability to show that we can reduce costs in the overall process by advancing advanced technology. So it doesn't always have to be about how much more money we're going to spend. It could also be about the efficiencies in the way in which we're going to have other gains. But it really depends on your organization directly, which model is going to resonate more, and build for that model. Don't try to change minds with the business case. You want adoption of the business case at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things. Sometimes staying still is actually going backwards. So doing nothing means you fall behind. So trying to find that information around, well, what is everyone else doing? What are the other investments that are happening out there in my competitors, which mean actually not doing something puts me backwards, because then you have a different dynamic to your business case. And then finally, if you can find an amenable stakeholder in the business, a business lead, operations, marketing, someone who owns a department, and run that kind of what if session with them. What if we could bring talent faster? If we could do that, you know, what is it worth? Their voice will always be more valid, and I mean that in a polite way. But the business saying, I need this to help me deliver talent that affects the business this way, will always have far greater validity than we do as talent acquisition professionals, because we're talking about their outcomes. When if they talk about their outcomes, it's direct. So that would be my advice.
I like it. And Anna Marie, I'm sure if there are other questions, I'm going to, perhaps Matt and I can answer them offline, because I'm looking at the time, and we're happy to take those offline and make sure that they get addressed for the audience as well.
Yep, I think that's a great recommendation, Elaine. You two can close us out.
Great. Well, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we're getting, as part of joining us for the webinar, you're getting a copy of our new white paper that's just coming out, the Tech-Enabled Talent Acquisition, a Strategic Investment for Success. It's a lot of the points that we've been talking about here, but so much more, and in support in ways in which you can really think about what you need to do in order to be successful with your talent acquisition technology going forward.
I would just like to give everyone a quick teaser that we will be launching something very exciting, telling the world about some of our tech investments at Cielo, the latest round of our innovation and tech investments. So look out for some announcements landing on March the 31st.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Elaine and Matt, for a great dynamic conversation today, and for our engaged audience for asking questions and participating in the poll. I hope everyone has a good rest of the day, and look for an email from us tomorrow with a recording, Elaine's wonderful new white paper, and access to this PowerPoint presentation as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.